Head in the cloud, feet on the ground. I'm actually working for a team at Microsoft that really focuses on industry trends and strategic projects. For the next 25 minutes, I would like to introduce you to some of the opportunities I think which are out there when technology trends converge. Really stuff merges together. And the 4 trends I'm talking about are mobile, social, big data, and cloud. When I look at entrepreneurs around the globe, I see that people focusing on 1 or 2 of these trends. But it actually becomes extremely powerful when you focus on the convergence of all of them. Think about Spotify. Spotify gives you apps on multiple devices, on desktops, on literally every platform. It uses the cloud to stream the music to you. It uses big data to mine stuff and make music recommendations. And it gives you social capabilities so you can follow people, you can follow playlists. So it's the combination of all of it. But most importantly, they're actually focusing on something that we call devices and services. If you think about Spotify, they're monetizing the service. They're not monetizing on the device side. Reflect on mobility for a couple of seconds. In the very beginning, a lot of the money has been made on per download. You actually pay per download. If you now look where monetization really goes big, it's actually in in-app purchases. Because that is something that can recur, can happen more than once. And if you go one step further and really have a service in the center of your solution, this is the first step to really come up with recurring revenue, understanding your customer base, and increasing the importance of your service to your customers and consumers. So who bought a new device in the last 6 months? Who's going to buy a new device in the next 6 months? Why do we focus on the device? Because they're going to change frequently. If you do not have something in place which recognizes the user, which allows the user to store the data across all the devices, and if you're not monetizing on the service backend, you actually lose out on big opportunities which are out there. Let's take Angry Birds. I loved playing Angry Birds when it came out. Do you know when I stopped playing it? When I got a new device. I do not mind buying the app. I really do not mind paying $4. I do mind playing through all these levels again because they have no clue who I am. That's when I stopped playing Angry Birds. Unfortunately, on Monday evening, my phone went down the loo. Literally. So yesterday morning, I went to a shop and bought a new one. Guess which apps are still installed? Which are the ones I'm going to continue using? The ones who knew who I am and the ones who had a service backend. Every other app is dead for me. So it is about the user, it's about its data, and then you have apps. So I'm going to talk about 3 things that I believe modern solutions should have. So the first thing is you should take advantage of that the world is at your fingertip. Your market is global, and your competition too. The second thing is modern solutions really have to provide a seamless experience across devices. I mean, who's going to know what is the dominant device platform in 5 years? If you go to South Korea, Android has kind of a market share of 98%. Who thought that iOS is going to be down on 14 on smartphones? So what's going to be next? How does this landscape look in 5 years? We don't know. The only thing I know is that solutions that we build need to work seamless across devices. And then last but not least, data insight. I truly believe that data science is the next rock and roll. Truly believe this. And it's maybe one of the most interesting areas to invest into if people are actually thinking about what to study. So let's start. So the cloud is a new design point. A lot of people think the cloud is a place. The cloud is not a place, it's a style. It doesn't matter whether you're going to use public, private, or a partner cloud. What really matters is that you do cloud-style computing. So it's not a place, it's a style of computing like client-server was in the past. The one thing I just want to put some iteration on it. The cloud democratizes access to scale and reach. I mean, this is just beautiful. If you're building a business today, I mean, this is pure gold. Access to scale, which means your customer base is global. You can reach every single one on this planet without investing up front. And scale means there is an infrastructure at your fingertip that can serve all these customers while you grow. So I meet a lot of startups across the globe, and I'm always surprised that some of them have not a single customer in the country they live. If people are not thinking this way, then you have to take the opposite. Your competition is not just in the country you live. The competition is global too. So let's have a look how this evolved. When you think about back in the 70s, one of the main reasons why we built these supercomputers, and this is gray one, was we wanted to do weather forecasting. Now, that thing cost something like $5 to $8 million US. So you were able to do weather forecast. So only large institutions with a lot of money were able to do this. Now, the cloud democratized that. And today, everyone can. A team of 2 people back in Redmond actually built a weather forecast model using publicly available algorithms, using publicly available weather data. And they came up with a weather forecast, and they overlay the actual forecast on top of Bing Map. So things were in the past, only with a lot of money are today possible with very small teams, very agile, without owning any infrastructure. And that's the mindset we just have to indulge. As I was saying, it is the cloud-style computing that makes it possible. So when you think about building a service backend, a service infrastructure, think about possibility of growing. Think about scale out rather than scale up. Because the cloud is built on principles of scale out and partitioning. Other principles are composition. Focus on the things you're good at and take a partner for other stuff you're less good at. I'm always saying the cloud really gives you the opportunity to do service orientation at the large scale. And then last but not least, it's not only in the public cloud. If you have sensitive data, it's okay to actually move this into a data center close by you. Just ensure that ultimately your system can deal with the hybrid state as the ultimate state. If you want to be agile, if you want to conquer new markets, and if your major skill set is adding value and not building IT infrastructure, the level of abstraction is actually the data center. And that's what we call platform as a service, where you only deploy your application, your service, and you just say, what is the data center? It's going to be the data center in Northern Europe, Western Europe, East Asia, West US, East US, and that's it. And the configuration of this app, including load balancers and everything, actually happens like magic. Compare this to dealing with individual servers. This gives you real agility. So the new level of abstraction is the data center, not the server. Which really leads me to the second point. So how can we now build these seamless experiences to our users? And for me, the key really is you need to know the user. The service then needs to store its data, and you need to build apps on the platforms that they actually need. Bring your own device is one of the things, which is fairly, it's one of the buzzwords, I would say. And Gartner is just saying, look, by 2017, half of employers will require employees to supply their own device for work purposes. So now that has two sides. So one side is, it's great, you can bring your own iPad to work. The second question then is, do you actually get a work device as well? Do you have to pay for it yourself? There are already examples out there of point-of-sale solutions in the US where you're not going to get a job if you do not have an iPhone, because the point-of-sale solution works only on iOS. Now, considering that the market share of devices changed rapidly, that actually means that a solution that was totally suitable on day one might not be suitable for the majority of people on day two, just because market share changed. For me, the key point about bring your own device, I do not believe that it is about the device when you're at work. I believe you want to use the device when you're actually at home, when you're commuting. That's where it is the most powerful. So devices, and this really applies if you're building solutions for the commercial space, really consider building apps for scenarios where people are not in the office. Because that is obviously where a device brings the mobility and the always connectiveness that you're actually looking for. And then it shouldn't be about the device. As I was saying, every of these solutions need to recognize the user, authenticate it, store the data, and then provide suitable apps for it. If you're building solutions for consumers, just use either Facebook login, Microsoft accounts, Twitter login, Google ID, or whatever existing authentication methods which are out there. If you're building solutions for the commercial space, you can use Active Directory. We have Active Directory in the cloud for small and medium businesses. If you're actually intend to sell your solution to enterprises, then use Federation to federate their existing Active Directory infrastructure. But you need to know who the users are. And once you know who they are, you can restrict access to data, and you can ensure that some of the corporate policies are in place. And then it is about multi-device. I mean, why do you have an iPad, an iPhone, and an Android device, and/or? Because they have different form factors. They have different connectivity capabilities. So building solutions really means thinking about what are the devices that can add value. Where do you need connectivity? Where do you actually need the capability of easy browsing and content consumption? And that builds a great portfolio of devices and apps, and you store the data in a service, you monetize it on a monthly or an annual base, and you are actually free to really follow the market trends and ensure you can build apps when they're actually needed. You start with the service on the back end, you focus on the service, you know who the users are, you store the data, and you provide that through apps. And then do not forget about one person has multiple devices, and that experience really needs to be seamless. That's, for me, so crucial. And when my phone went down the loo Monday evening, on Tuesday morning, when I bought my new phone, I instantly knew which are the apps which deal with this smart and which are the apps that lost my business. And really, that's easy. Which leads me now to the last thing, data insight. There is so much data out there, but we still have, and there is so much opportunity to collect data, as we know. There is still a mindset, I think, that storing data is expensive. So what you see here is Manchester City, the football club Manchester City. And you see a map of the players and whether they're pass forward or backward. So Manchester City collected data, their X, Y, Z position, where they pass in the timeline during their games. If you think this view of the data has been developed by Manchester City, you're actually wrong. They had the data, but they didn't know what to do with it. So they outsourced the data on the public web, and a fan built this heat map, which allows you, obviously, to have a much more analytic view of your players. You can adjust your trainings. You can analyze certain games, why you won, why you lost, and so forth. Now the data is not public anymore. So we have a lot of gold assets, but we're not aware of it, and we're not using it. Or we even throw it away. And one of the reasons why we throw stuff away is because we think storage is expensive. In the 80s, 10 megabyte, $3,398 US. You see, the hard disk you've been waiting for. Today, with the economy of scale of the cloud, we have geo-redundant storage. So for instance, we store on Windows Azure 1 gigabyte. If you store 1 gigabyte in one of our data centers, it's actually stored at 2 locations. So you have geo-redundance. And within each data center, we store 3 copies. So you actually have 6 gigabyte of actual storage used. Now think about doing this back in the 80s. It would have cost you $2 million to do so. You would have got 50% discount, still $1 million. And that mindset of throwing stuff away is still out there. But today, Windows Azure storage, 1 gigabyte, $0.095. You can actually store 1 gigabyte over 5 years for less than $6. So now my question to you, who stores all its weblogs? Who? No one. So you're actually throwing away the biggest asset you have to improve your service. You throw away from where people accessing your service, you throw away how long they spend on your site, you throw away when they abandon the shopping cart, you throw away what device they use, you throw away what language they use, you throw away what IP address. You throw all that information away, which is pure gold. Reflect on this. It is because maybe you think storing that stuff is too expensive. How do you improve a site if you do not have the historical usage of it? Who is actually telling you why they didn't complete a certain transaction? Why they couldn't convert from trial to an actual subscription? How many times do you actually tell a customer, a company, that you want to buy something that you couldn't buy it? Only if they're friends. Otherwise, you just move on and buy the very same thing from someone else. If you store the weblogs, you have that information somewhere. So it's no surprise that with storage that cheap, everyone talks about big data. But do you know what is the smallest big data problem which is out there? Any ideas? If you have too much data to store it on one device or one disk, it becomes a big data problem, just the smallest one. So there are two steps in every single big data project. Store, 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 and store. Step number one. And if you use a big data solution, you do not need to care across how many disks that stuff has been stored. And once you have all that stuff, once you have your petabyte or terabyte of data, you do step number two. You have to move compute to the data, because you have too much data to move the data to compute. And if you think about Hadoop, one of the most known big data solutions, it exactly solves these two problems. Hadoop HDFS, Hadoop Distributed File System, allows you to store petabyte of data without knowing where physically it is stored. And MapReduce allows you to write an algorithm which runs in parallel across all these nodes. These two things. And it's out there. It's available as a service. You don't need to have a large data center to take advantage of this. Because once you have data, data can tell you the what. And then we get into step number two. And that's when I was saying, a data scientist, that is really the next rock and roll. Because that tells you why. And only if you know why, you can take action. Let's have a look into this. So back in 1854 in London, they had some cholera outbreaks. And they thought it's actually an airborne disease. Dr. John Snow was a very young physician, and he thought, no, this has to be something with water. This is a waterborne disease. So what he did, he started to collect data. So the first what he did, he plotted cholera outbreaks on the map. And you see it's really around one particular area. And then, because he thought it's going to be waterborne, he took all the wells, the water pumps. And you clearly see that it must have something to do with this Broad Street pump, because people died around this pump. But unfortunately, it's not that simple, because he had some noise in its data, because people were also dying in the south of Soho, and there were actually people living quite healthy up in the brewery. So he had two anomalies. And that is where, so this is what the data tells you. It's only the what. This is the fact. Now he wanted to understand why. So he talked to people. And he talked to the Reverend Henry Whitehead, who actually knew how these people live, what they do. And he was saying to him, hey, this is very, very clear. Because the people from the noisy data area, they brought their kids to school to the north. And what did they do on the way back? They brought water with them. So it's very clear they had some outbreaks there too. And the brewery, first of all, the brewery workers only drank beer and not water, which must be much healthier. And they had their own well, so they had their own water pump. So it's really about having the data and then making clever decisions based on people and their understanding of the context tells you the why. And then you can really plot that stuff. So what you see here is, imagine now, you have your weblog data. You have geo information. You can actually see where are the people who buy certain things from you. Because you can plot that stuff on top of, for instance, a map. And going with such a map to someone fosters a conversation, helps you to understand certain issues, certain causes, and you can take action. You can improve your service, or you can change certain things. So with this, we talked about, a solution really can't just be cloud, can't just be social, can't just be mobile, and can't just be big data. It's the convergence of that stuff that makes you differentiate from others. So the big question now is, what's next? And that's just me guessing, so there is necessarily no truth in that, but I believe our stuff needs to become more intelligent. Because if we have the data, if we know the what and the why, we can make predictive analytics. We can forecast certain things. So what that means is, for instance, here Bing can tell you what is the likelihood that this fare on this flight is actually going to increase. So you're better going to buy it now because the likelihood is 50%. So that's kind of making decisions, recommendations, predictions based on the historical data that we mine using big data technology. I believe writing intelligent software, writing actually automation is going to be something that certainly is going to be a big thing. And for me, this is also like the rise of the machines. And I think it also matches very nicely to the next panel conversation which takes place on robotics. I didn't know that when I was actually writing this deck. So thank you very much, and I hope I could give you some thoughts around what it actually means when stuff gets together, that it is much bigger than just one out of the few things. Thank you.